Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Eric Phillips. I serve as the Economic Development Director for the City of Marysville and Union County. And, my job is to promote growth and development. We've started a speaker series last year to bring impactful projects to you, to learn more about them, why growth is important, why prosperity is important, and how they go in sync with each other. And so tonight, we had one earlier this year. We did a community visiting session. We did a report. We have that on our website you can actually take a look at. Tonight, we're doing our second of 3 this year. This one is focused on impactful projects that are really going to change the landscape of Marysville for many years to come. One is a redevelopment project known as the Silos of Water and Light. And then secondly, we're going to talk about the New Albany Company and their proposed business park in 2 different locations in Marysville. So that's tonight, to learn a little bit about development and what it means to us and our future as we work together and grow together. But I want to thank, first of all, the Avalon. Thank you, Ryan, for your leadership. He's outside. Let's give the Avalon a round of applause for hosting. And we also thank all of you for your interest in the growth and development of our community. A lot of you are business leaders, community leaders. Your leadership is what makes Marysville and Union County special. So thank you for all what you do. Tonight, I'm talking way too much already. Everyone said get off the stage. We have 3 speakers. We have Matt McAllister, who's Executive Vice President for One Columbus. His responsibility is the region, the Columbus region. So he's going to talk a little bit about the regional landscape, what it means to Marysville and Union County. Second, we have Bob Lamb. Bob is in charge of land development for Connect Realty, and he is going to talk about the project here in Uptown Marysville. And then last but not least, Matt McQuaid, who actually is representing the New Albany Company, to talk about the business park and what it means to this community. And at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So Matt, Bob, and then Matt will speak, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. Hopefully we'll be out here in an hour, get you home a little bit on time. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to start off the evening. So thank you very much for coming.
Mic check. Can you guys hear me? Yep, awesome. All right, so Eric asked that I take a few minutes and talk about the importance of transformational projects and how they can impact the region and obviously our local communities, which Marysville is one of our communities in our region. So transformational projects are critical because they're what really drive the economic growth and development of the region. They inject new blood into our economic base. They inject housing, which drives population growth. And they can also provide opportunities for the citizens of each of the towns and more importantly, the citizens of our region. And so transformational projects, they can come in the form of commercial, office, industrial, and or residential projects. And basically the key, though, is that they're all going to have some sort of significant positive impact on the community and the region in which they land. So one obvious example, and this is probably one that everyone's heard of, is Intel. This is a $28 billion project. There's no doubt that just in the construction employment, before they even get to their 3,000 jobs, it's going to have a significant impact across our region. Whether it's the 2,400 construction workers that are on site today, whether it's the 3,000 permanent employees that'll be there, whether it'll be the suppliers that'll be there. There's 40 to 50 suppliers that'll likely be surrounding them all around our region, probably some of them outside of our region as well. But the indirect employees as well. So this is a project that has a multiplier, depending on how you look at it, anywhere between like 8, 9, or 10. That means 8, 9, or 10 jobs will be created for every single direct employee that Intel hires. So you think about that. If they do 10 and they have 3,000, that's 30,000 jobs will be supported by that project. That's a transformational project in its nutshell. But it's not just the only transformational project, and they're not all $28 billion projects. Another one I'd mention is Illuminate USA. This is a project in Pataskala, 1,000 jobs on its way to 1,200 people in a year. They ramped up to 1,000 people. They manufacture solar panels. And this is a project that occurred because Pataskala had a relationship with a developer, and they together put together a package to do a spec building. And that spec building was ultimately purchased by Envergy and it became the Illuminate USA project. This is why we won the project. It was because they had a building that was available, ready to go. And I can tell you, not only is it transformational, it's the largest manufacturing project in Pataskala. It's one of the top 5 manufacturing projects now in Licking County. So it's significant, and it's going to continue to grow. But I'd also add, projects like Amgen and Pharmavite in New Albany, Stack Pharma, Sarepta in the city of Columbus, Forge Biologics in Grove City, they could all be viewed as transformational as well, because they've basically put us on the map as a life science center. We have credibility now when we're out talking to other life science companies because we've got this a pool of companies that are driving a sector, and so that's critical. They're also critically important to the individual communities they're in. There are hundreds of jobs, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, each of them, and they've all been announced probably for the past 5 years, maybe 6 years. And most people don't even know the names I just mentioned, but they represent hundreds and hundreds of employees, hundreds of millions of dollars each of investment, and they're having a significant impact collectively across our region. I'd also mention hyperscale data centers as being a transformational type project. A great example. If you think about hyperscale data centers, what do they need? They need power and they need water. And a lot of times they're putting infrastructure in that can be leveraged by manufacturers. I firmly believe part of the reason, not the sole reason, but part of the reason that Intel ended up where it did was because the community, New Albany, AEP, and the city of Columbus had proven that they could deliver the scale of water and power that they would need because they'd already done it for AWS, Meta, and Google. So that was a critical transformational project. And while most people may not think of them as being transformational, they transformed that community, and they'll transform additional communities because now they're spreading out. Google is in South Columbus and Lancaster. AWS is spreading out as well. And they're putting in utility level that we haven't seen before, and capacities that we haven't seen before. So that's something that's also can be transformational as well. Many of these transformational projects are also going to have impact well beyond our region. I think a great example, again, is Intel, but maybe even a better one is because of the investment that Honda has made and commitment to build electric vehicles right here, there's a Honda LG battery plant outside of our region now. This is something that is, again, it's going to be transformational for Fayette County. It's also going to be transformational for a lot of our region. We are the preferred location for a lot of the suppliers that are going to be servicing that plant. So it's almost a transformational project inside of a transformational project, and they have a tendency to do that. Honda committing to make electric cars here, driving battery, driving R&D, all sorts of things. And then obviously they're going to have a whole supply chain because it's a new industry for us. So that's critically important, and that's a component of a lot of our transformational projects is it's bringing new industries into a region. These are just a few examples of transformational projects that in the way they can impact a region or the communities they locate in. But I'd like to switch gears a bit and talk what it takes to land a transformational project. And I kind of feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys have partners that have done a number of transformational projects, but I don't know that you know that. I would say that you have to be number one, you have to be a ready and willing community. And while most companies that we work with are evaluating our region, most of them don't come in and say, we want to know the population of Marysville and the workforce of Marysville. They say, we want to know the population of the region, and we probably want to look at a 20, 30, maybe 45-minute drive time from the site. We're looking at the regional assets. We want to know, access to students at Ohio State, access to maybe people already working in R&D in your region. But they have to locate in a community. So we can look great on paper as a region, but if we don't have the site in the community that can actually get the project done and can instill faith in the project itself that they can get it done, they'll move on. Because while our region might look good on paper, there's other regions that are going to look just as good on paper. And so, that's something that we have an advantage of, typically, is we do look very good on paper. We have great population growth, although I'll mention the population growth is great when you compare us against many of the Midwest. But if you look at us against like Raleigh, Charlotte, Nashville, Austin, we're about half of what Raleigh is. We're about a third of what Austin is, and everything else is in between. So, at the best case, they're growing a third faster than us. So I throw that out there because we do commonly compete against other Midwest locations, but now that we're doing a lot of these transformational projects and even some of the mega projects, we are getting a lot of competition from outside. The other things you have to have is you have to have readily available sites, and they can be in various levels of readiness, but they have to have some due diligence done on them. I know you have a partner here, we will hear from later, that prides itself in the due diligence and how they prepare a site. So I think you guys are going to be set up very well there. You do have to demonstrate access to talent. I mentioned we do the 10, the 15, or the 15, the 30, and the 45-minute drive time commutes. I can tell you one of the things that's been interesting lately is that companies are a lot more committed to the 15 and 30 evaluation than the 45. So if you're relying upon a 45-minute drive time to prove that you have the available workforce, you're at a disadvantage. You need to be able to show it at 15 and 30 minutes. So that means you need to have population growth, close to home, if not in your backyard. And then obviously, cost of living is also starting to play a bit of a role in this. And, obviously the primary driver of the cost of living is housing, and you need to have a full spectrum. You need to have everything from rental to entry level to executive to even senior housing, because that's how you're going to actually unlock some of your existing housing, is through providing senior housing. People that can move into senior housing and stay in the same community are much more likely to maybe get out of that house where they raise their family and their kids and make it available to another young family. So that's something critically important as well. And it is the number one cost. Housing is the number one cost that's driving wage growth. So when companies are looking at it, they're not looking at it because they don't think that the population growth's there. They're concerned about, okay, if we come here, are our wages going to have to escalate? Because if we impact this region, if we have a transformational project that's going to have such an impact, it's going to drive real estate prices up, what's it going to do to our wages? And so that's something just to consider as well. In closing, I'd just say that transformational projects may be those that bring in a new sector that'll thrive and grow in our region, or it could be a supplier that'll be the top employer in one of our smaller communities, or it could be a rehabilitation of an old building into a vibrant mixed-use project that's going to bring much-needed commercial and residential growth to a community. It could be any of those. And I've touched on a number of things here that I would just ask that you take in consideration as we learn about some of these additional projects that are going to be shared this evening. So with that, Eric, I'll turn it back over to you, and maybe you can introduce Bob as he enters.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. Matt's been a great leader in the community. One Columbus does a fantastic job of working with the local governments to support economic development. So we thank Matt and his leadership. Next, we have Bob Lamb. Bob's going to talk about a special project in Uptown Marysville. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Hi, Bob Lamb. I'm with, is this on? You hear me? Okay, great. Bob Lamb. So I am with Connect Real Estate. We are a Central Ohio, Columbus-based development firm. We specialize in tax credit-oriented developments, working specifically with communities and focused on a lot of blighted, brownfield, vacant-type properties. And so, well, I had slides. There we go. That way? Okay, there we go. So some of the projects that we have recently finished up, and I wanted to go through these development projects so that you could have a better understanding of what Connect does, what we've done in Central Ohio, and what we plan on doing here in Marysville in partnership with the city and the school district. So one of the recent projects we finished up a couple of years ago was Municipal Light Plant. This was the historic light plant for the city of Columbus. It was vacant for about 60 years. It was falling into disrepair when Connect purchased it from the city. We redeveloped it into 100,000 square feet of Class A office space as well as event space. Currently, the crew has their headquarters located out of the building. Connect is also located out of the building. And so this is located directly across from New Crew Arena. So if you're familiar with the building downtown with the big yellow smokestack on it, that's the building. That's the one you see during crew games that light up the yellow smoke when the crew scores. There we go. So one of the other projects that we were doing at the same time as we were working on the municipal light plant was what we call Trolley District. Trolley District was a 5-acre site where the old trolley system would run in the city of Columbus. It was vacant for about 70 years when Connect purchased it. Again, another brownfield blighted property located just south of Franklin Park Conservatory. So an area that was very central to that portion of the city of Columbus and really needed help on the redevelopment side. We went into the building that we now call the East Market. This was the main facility for the trolley repair. Turned it into basically a location that services 18 different food stalls, 2 different bar restaurant locations located in there as well, and then event space also located on the top floor. And also at this facility is the new Columbus Brewing Company main location, as well as office space and a variety of other uses. Located directly across the street from this, you can see that in the top right picture where you can kind of see a lay lot, is where our new apartment complex is being built right now. This is 102 apartment units going in directly next to the Trolley District location. And so the rendering there is what those apartments will look like upon completion. So market-oriented, the same type of product we want to bring to Marysville at this location. You can see some of the interior and the finishes. This is one of the 1-bedroom developments. It's about 830 square feet in size. I'm hoping it gives you trouble too, so. So it's not wanting to jump back. There. So I had a picture of the downtown that's not wanting me to get to, but I think you're all very familiar with the site. Located to the right side of the board is the existing silos, the white silos that you see as a main feature whenever you're driving into the downtown. Then across the street is what's the open field currently, and then just north of that is the historic water treatment plant. We are looking at redeveloping this entire site, and this project really came together through a partnership structure that was created with the city and the school district. So for about the last year and a half, we've been working very closely with the city, who was the property owner at this location, and looking at different ways to position the site for redevelopment. We worked with the city to secure funds from the state through the transformational mixed-use development tax credit. So this is where the state basically is making an investment back into the community with the award of an $8 million tax credit. So it's a chance for the local community to bring dollars back into Marysville that otherwise would not have come into the community. And then working with the city as well on the zoning of it, so repositioning the site so it would be a mixed-use development. We'll have apartment units located there. We'll have office space located there, a community fitness facility that is privately owned and operated on site, but available for anyone in the community to secure a membership, And then also at the silos, we'll have event space, a hospitality space, so a bar restaurant location, as well as corporate housing opportunities. So where organizations like Honda or Scott's would be able to have rooms that could be rented out for individuals visiting for those purposes. I'm not even touching anything at this point, and it's changing, so we'll just continue to proceed with it. So this is a picture of the silos and how we'll redevelop them with items oriented towards the street as well as the creekside in order to establish a very welcoming place that pulls people in. You have the bar location outside to maximize those views. The silos you see in the back, we will repaint them, we will reposition them so that they're back to more of a historic nature on that site. Again, before I could hit anything. So jumping across the street here, these are just some renderings of the project. It seems to be moving on its own, so I'll let it go. But I was talking about the city and the partnership that was established with the city throughout this process. We did that through a lot of different interactions with both city council as well as staff. Both city council and staff were amazing to work with throughout this project. But one of the key things that allowed this to happen was we were able to structure a partnership with the school district. The schools really supported the project. They saw the benefit of bringing additional housing and jobs to the area. They especially saw the benefit of taking what was a blighted piece of land located in the downtown of the community, taking it from currently a status where it wasn't generating any revenue or positive results for the school district, moving it to a privately owned commercial facility that would generate tax dollars for the community overall. So we really appreciated what the schools did, how they came to the table, how great they were willing to work with us throughout the process. So, and then, as you can see, just kind of moving. I can jump back. So this picture here, this is basically from an angle of the silos looking down into the site. So currently, mostly vacant, one historic building. The site is being repositioned in this manner. So up on the right-hand side would be the historic water treatment plant. That becomes office space under the plan. Adjacent to it, kind of hidden by that tree that's right next to it, would be where the fitness facility would be located. You see a historic bridge, so we are working with both the city and the county on being able to take one of the bridges in the community that's scheduled to be taken down and replaced by the county, and saving that bridge and bringing it to the site where it'll be installed as a pedestrian pathway on the site, so connecting the north and south side with an additional bridge, as well as extending the trail that currently exists and tying it back into itself so it becomes a complete 10-mile loop throughout the community. This would be from the other angle. So you're seeing silos in the background and then looking southward towards the downtown onto the site. So, and just giving you some images of how the project buildings will look from a more closer view. This project will be focused on bringing in really young professionals, as well as providing some housing options for empty nesters, looking at both townhome mix as well as apartments, the majority of the apartments being 1 and 2 bedrooms. So that's really the kind of general overview. Eric had asked for me to keep it brief and quick, and the slideshow made it go even faster. So if you do want to see any of the renderings, though, I have them on my phone. Happy to walk through after the meeting if we jump past a slide that you want to see better. Eric?
Yep. Thank you, Bob. Let's give you a round of applause. So we're having a battle with Savannah's moving the slides too, and that's why we're going back and forth. But you're doing okay. We're trying to get the slides to work. But thank you, Bob. And the truss bridge is actually located down near Fairbanks High School. That's what's being relocated for this site as well. But without further ado, I want to introduce Matt McQuaid, who's working with the New Albany Company. Matt used to work for One Columbus, now is a consultant, economic development consultant, does great work in the region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about the NACO project in Marysville.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for your leadership and putting this together. Thank you all for being here this evening. So, as Eric said, my name's Matt McQuaid. I'm here representing the New Albany Company. But before I talk about our development plans for Marysville, I want to reflect back on the early years of my career in economic development. So before I spun out on my own into private practice and started doing work for the New Albany Company, as Eric mentioned, I was an economic development practitioner. So I put in 17 years in various positions in economic development with the state of Ohio, and then spent 12 unbelievable years at One Columbus. And I've seen a lot of change. And some of the themes I'm going to present this evening I think are going to be sort of accentuated by the first couple of slides. So Savannah, would you mind advancing to the first slide? So change is a key theme that I'm going to talk about tonight, and the constants of change. When I started my career, it didn't look like this just yet, but 2006, y'all can do the math. A couple short years after that, the bottom fell out of the economy and we plunged into the Great Recession. So these graphics that you see on the screen are how I think a lot of us remember those years: capital just being sucked out of the global economy, demand decreasing, so you saw boarded up storefronts, home foreclosures. Ohio was at a very low point at that time. And I can tell you, and I'm sure Eric can as well, that and Matt McAllister and Bob, we've all worked in economic development for quite some time. Those were pretty dark times for the state of Ohio, and it was really hard to look into the crystal ball, into the future, and see positive change. So that pushed me out of Ohio at the state level, and really made me want to go over to what was called Columbus 2020 at the time. It was being formed. Columbus wasn't in a tough situation. It was in a much better situation than the rest of the state of Ohio, but the pervasive attitude that was growing among business and political leaders in Columbus at the time was that Columbus was missing its chance. It had a lot of assets, a lot of great employers. It obviously had the seat of government for the state of Ohio. You have Ohio State, you've got big private research institutions like Battelle, but Columbus was starting to lag behind its peer markets in the Midwest. So it was decided that change was needed, and change was needed right now. And that's why Columbus 2020 was formed, to solidify a region, to actually have a vision for what the region could be, to have a strategy to achieve that vision, and the program of work that actually creates demand for the market. Shortly after Columbus 2020 was formed, Jobs Ohio was formed. And both organizations kind of helped solidify the other. Jobs Ohio defined regions within the state that they support, that had their own strategies and raised their own money, One Columbus being the one for this part of the region. And that also helped One Columbus solidify its approach to regionalism, to the 11 counties, it was 8 at the time, that they were going to go to market with. Next slide, please, Savannah. So the flywheel gets turning for both organizations, and you start seeing results, but there were still some pretty significant global economic headwinds. I mean, even going back into the Great Recession, we were still in a highly globalized economy where you had long and complex supply chains. You had the impact of automation, but it's not what you saw today. But as One Columbus and Jobs Ohio continued to move, those headwinds that have been in Ohio's face for probably the better part of 40 years, dating back to the mid-'60s, when steel started to get disrupted, when you started to see the automotive supply chain spread out a little bit, we started to see those things changing. And one of the key lessons from that is change is the only constant. Like, if I look back at 2009, never could have imagined being on the stage here today talking to you about the positive growth pressures that we're seeing. There were still pressures way back then, but the point is, We're dealing with challenges as we look at community development, but they are much better challenges than we were dealing with a short 15 years ago. And just to give you a couple of examples, like I had to be a part of projects in 2009. It wasn't about helping a company expand or attracting a new company in. The phone was ringing off the hook from companies who were not going to make payroll, and they were panicked and they had no other solutions. You don't really see that now. But back then, I had to be a part of DHL leaving the Wilmington Air Park, decimated that community. Masco Mills Pride in Waverly, Ohio, left, decimated that community. GM in Ontario, outside of Mansfield, shut down, decimated that community. So change is the only constant in this business, and that change is only accelerating because of the semiconductor. Matt was talking about Intel earlier, and I'll touch upon them a couple of additional times. When you just look at the regionalization of supply chains, kind of untying globalization, the semiconductors are one of the big reasons for that. That was one of the most disrupted products during COVID. The automotive industry, the aerospace industry, the tech industry, obviously, their supply chain dysfunction was based largely on their inability to get semiconductors because their supply chain is spread so far across the globe. But where the semiconductors also having an impact is automation and increasing productivity, because when we were fighting the Southeast US back in the early 2000s or international competition still today, we're largely fighting what the industry calls labor arbitrage, which is just trying to find the lowest cost, most productive labor for your product, and that oftentimes is not here. And between energy costs, increasing transportation costs, between automation, reducing the need for workforce, those are some of the major things, in addition to supply chain resiliency, that is giving us all this new opportunity. Didn't see that happening 5 or 6 years ago. So change is really the only constant. Industries come and go. The companies that are driving those industries change constantly. The technologies within those industries change constantly. And it's only happening faster in this digital world. Next slide, please. So what that means for communities is that you constantly have to be spotting trends, understanding what's going on, and evolving. Because with change, especially in this business, there's really no second place. There's a clear winner and a clear loser. And in the example that I gave you previously, Ohio was really a loser in what was happening with the global economy for the good part of 40 years. I am a Buckeye through and through. I am a proud Ohioan. Just think about 2006 when I started. The Buckeyes got boat raced by Florida in the national title game, the year Troy Smith won the Heisman. I would hear the SEC chant in my sleep, but it had to do with economic development. That's how haunting it was to try to grow this state, to try to bring prosperity to this state when it really felt like the tables were stacked against you. So there's a clear winner and a clear loser, but the good news is Ohio's solidly going back into that winning column with the way things have changed, and because the state and the region were prepared. Had Jobs Ohio and One Columbus not been created when they were, we would still be trying to figure all this stuff out right now and may not have the bandwidth to do it. But because of planning and because those decisions and investments were made when they were, we were ready, and we were able to bring new industries into the state and win big projects like Intel, but not only Intel, plenty of singles and doubles along the way. A couple of other things to articulate this point. Just look at what happened over the last week in Columbus. A Fortune 1000 headquartered company, Big Lots, declared bankruptcy. Wasn't the first, won't be the last, but there's always stuff like that occurring in the economy. I am thrilled at Nestle's plans to expand here and consolidate operations, but what you win, what you won, somebody else lost. And in a different situation, those tables could have been turned, and that takes demand out of the economy, that takes revenue out of the city coffers, it takes revenue out of the schools. It's important. You have to look at it that way. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. You have to make sure that you're doing your research and you're prepared to be on the winning end, because things move incredibly quickly. Next slide, please. So one of the main points that I'm making here I'm an economic developer. They're economic developers. Don't be completely confused by what we do for a living. Yes, economic growth is what we're after. Prosperity is what we're after. We all believe that the greatest force for change in a person's life is a good job. And at the end of the day, that's what we are trying to bring to communities as part of our work. But it is not solely about economic growth. Today, I would argue, it's more about economic diversification, because things are changing so quickly that it can give you whiplash. And if you're not monitoring how your economy is made up and what's going on within each of those industries and how those companies are doing and who may disrupt them and where technology's going, there's a chance that you're gonna lose out eventually. So diversifying the economy is critical, and that's one of the things when I look at what happened in the Columbus region, is one of the most telling elements of the region's success right now. And I'm not going to steal Matt's thunder because he rattled all of them off, but he named 3 new industries that the Columbus region didn't have before Columbus 2020 was founded that are developing here now. There will be industries that we have here now that will go away. So while those are all wins on the scorecard, and they're big wins, don't get me wrong, they're a hedge on our future because things will continue to change. The worst thing you can do in economic development is rest on your laurels. You got to be paying attention to this stuff. You got to have strategies. You got to be prepared. One of the many reasons I'm thrilled to be here tonight, just to see this many interested people in the community want to come out and hear about development and what's going on, because it impacts everyone. An employer shuts down, it's not just going to affect the employees. That affects the entire community and in a pretty big way. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the New Albany Company, or as we're calling ourselves in Marysville, the Marysville Land Company. So I work out of Build, just off the street. See a couple of recognizable faces there that are tenants as well. We've been here since early 2023. Next slide, please, Savannah. And the best way for me to articulate how we fit into this picture, if you've got one Columbus that's creating the demand and getting companies to look here, you've got Eric, who is running economic development for the county and the city, who is working with One Columbus on opportunities that may be looking in Marysville. You've got Bob and Connect, who are improving the quality of place here even more. So when users are coming through, they're like, damn, this is charming as all heck. I can see living here. I can see locating here. We're the ones that are helping the community be prepared with land, sites, that the users that Jobs Ohio, One Columbus, and sometimes ourselves are generating. We're not in the vertical construction business. So we are master planners, and what we say, we're in the dirt business. So we find ground that we believe has potential, and that can mean a variety of things, and start master planning its highest and best use, and then do all the things that are required to make a site market ready, which in some cases means annexation, in other cases means zoning. I also recognize some of you from meetings that we've had on such topics, both outside of city council and inside. It means infrastructure planning. It means working with the schools and the city on agreements to move the development forward. So we're developers, and I've been working in this community for a year and a half now. We haven't put a shovel in the ground outside of doing geotechnical borings. This is a long-term thing. So when I talk about the importance of diversification and the pace of change, if you're not ready for it, it's going to pass you by. Because things move that quickly. I would venture to guess that a lot of the calls that One Columbus gets these days with an opportunity, decisions made in 6 to 9 months. And if we haven't figured out how we're going to run a utility line somewhere, or say we want to work with you but we have to rezone, how long does that take? 6 to 9 months. It's too much risk. What these companies are trying to do is completely mitigate their risk and find the location where they can be most successful and they will be least surprised. And that's the way that we approach development. Next slide, please. So, and this is just the value that we provide, and it's twofold. So if you're a community, we come in and I don't want to say take something off the community's plate. Marysville's a little unique because they've developed a park, the 33 Innovation Park, but they've got a lot of other responsibilities above and beyond that. What we're now doing is coming in and planning a development that's larger than that, that's more long-term than that, freeing up capacity for them to handle other pressing matters in the community. Not saying that they're not going to do their own real estate-related stuff as well, but we're spending the money, taking the time to mitigate risk for a potential end user, so when opportunity comes a-knocking for Marysville to evolve and further diversify its economy, we're going to be ready and have everything in place that's ready to go. And if you're a user, it's kind of the same dynamic, just from the other side. Not all developers are built equally, not all sites are built equally, but if you're a community, where our value is that very same thing. We've done a lot of that advanced work. We've got all the information that could possibly be necessary on our property, and as those conversations move forward, we're ready to go, and they can kind of build out their matrix for our property compared to others, and hopefully determine that our site is in the best position and mitigates the most risk. Next slide, please. You can move past this one. So this is the best example that I can show you of work that we've done in the past, and this is the New Albany Business Park. So this is about 12,000 acres north of 161, northeast side of town. This is something that developed over 30 years. I mean, companies may have started locating there in the late 90s, but again, there's a lot of pre-development planning that needs to occur for something of this scale. And I don't even know that it was envisioned to be on this scale. It just kind of kept going. But to put things into a little more perspective on why this is so meaningful for Marysville, New Albany started in the late 80s around a country club, the New Albany Country Club, and then the plan just kept evolving, and the goal became, we want to be the best suburb in the country, always for setting big, audacious goals. And what do we need to do that? Well, one critical thing is to have the best schools in the state of Ohio. How do we do that? Well, we've got to broaden the tax base. How do we do that? Well, you've got to diversify the tax base, and you can't just rely on the homes that are being built and the residents. You've got to bring new money, new income into the community that's also paying taxes, that's spending their own money to small businesses who are also paying taxes, and that ultimately is what will give a community and a school district strong financial health. So that's kind of the origin story behind it. It just kept going, and this is why master planning is so valuable, because it just can lead to additional evolutions. And I'll just show you real quickly. So on the left, not the far left, that's Hamilton Corridor. That's really where things got started. Discover Card put a big office there, EMH&T, an engineering firm that we work with closely. They're there, Aetna's there. And that was the start, and I'm gonna skip over a few years, but I would argue its inflection point was really right above me right here, above Meta, above AEP, and that's the International Beauty Campus in the New Albany Business Park, and that's a supply chain vertical for Bath & Body Works. They recruited a bunch of their suppliers from all over the globe to come in and locate in this park and essentially have the fillings, the caps, the bottles, the labels, everything, different business in there that's producing it. And that really brought the business park a lot of attention. It brought the region a lot of attention. It was very timely because Columbus 2020 was getting started, and it gave us something really good to talk about. The next inflection point that Matt McAllister mentioned is right here, those big data centers. So AWS, Meta, Google, located along Beach Road, and then ultimately, he's right. The infrastructure that enabled those projects helped us sell Intel. Everything was right there in the area. The site was the biggest thing they were looking for, and the biggest nut to crack. And because of the infrastructure that's there, and because my client's experience with assembling land and the fact that they're always thinking 20 years down the road and could actually put the site together relatively quickly, it was not ready. It was not assembled. We did it on the fly and won the project in 9 months. That's how quickly things move. Projects like that used to take years, and locations like us would pursue them for decades. But it happened, but it was enabled by that infrastructure. We're not trying to recreate the New Albany Business Park here. So I want to make that clear. One of the reasons I wanted to show this to you was just to demonstrate we've done it before and we've done it very successfully. And if you've not been there or looked at it, I would encourage you to do so, because it does not look like any other industrial park or business park in the state of Ohio. But also to see the names up there. You know, we're not always going for, you know, big Fortune 100 tech companies, but it certainly is a validation on the quality of the development that you've got Google, Meta, Intel, Amgen, and the list goes on, all in that corner of the Columbus region. And again, 15 short years after it was almost unimaginable that we would see that kind of success. Next slide, please. These are just some pictures of the business park demonstrating the quality, the architecture, the landscaping. We can move past it. You can see all those elsewhere. I don't want to go over my 20 minutes. I already talked about some of the great employers. We can skip over that too. So our plans for Marysville, and Savannah, could you just go to the next slide, please? And I'm sorry that the text isn't coming through, but it's all zoning stuff, so you don't care. But this is Marysville East. So I see some of our neighbors out in the audience in Marysville East. US 33, Scotts Lawn, Watkins, that's the general area. Right now we've got close to 500 acres that we've annexed and zoned, really focused on our infrastructure planning right now. But we're continuing to work on that site. We started with this site. We're still not ready for development. We're getting closer, but this is about 500 acres. On the southeastern quadrant of 36 and 33 that we are planning for advanced manufacturing and digital infrastructure. Next slide, please. Other side of 33, Marysville South. So this one you've seen a little bit more news on lately because we recently rezoned it. Site has great infrastructure, nice big flat piece of land with rail, good access to highways. There are primary access issues though, so we're working on our infrastructure planning for Marysville South right now. We rezoned it because it had two separate zoning districts and did not have sufficient buffering for people that live along Weaver Road. So we wanted to write that into the text, and the bright colors that you see around the left side of the site really are those buffering. Or really, that's the buffering. So that's about 590 acres that is pretty close to Marysville East in terms of its timing, but we've got some pretty significant engineering to do there to access the site. Next slide, please. So implications on Marysville. One more, please. So in the immediate to long term, I'm not going to belabor the point. We proudly view our position in this ecosystem locally as putting the community in a position to compete for additional demand. So I know, and we joke around about this, that a lot of people think of like development success as we finally got a Chick-fil-A or a Grater's or something like that, a restaurant of some kind. And that's great. Don't get me wrong, not knocking it. Our role is bringing in the employers that create the jobs with the family-sustaining wages, if not high wages, that enable, the Chick-fil-A's or the Targets of the world to look on a map for where they need to put their next storefront and say, wow, this location incomes are going up. They look underserved. We should look here. We're the jobs people, and we put Marysville in partnership with the city, in partnership with the schools, and I hope you realize in partnership with the community, as we have held many sessions with residents in a position to compete. Next slide, please. And in the long term, none of this happens overnight. This is what economic development does. Decreases your downside exposure for when things change, and they will continue to do so. Increases tax revenue for the government to sustain, not increase the level of services, hopefully not having to raise the municipal income tax. That's what broadening the base does. It takes burden off of everybody else's back. Same thing goes for the school district. I mentioned the jobs and the income that generates to support small businesses. And then another big thing that often gets overlooked, when you have a larger, more dynamic, diverse economy, parents, grandparents that want to see your kids live in Marysville and raise their children here, this is what that does too. So I'll stop there. I hit my 15 minutes. I think we'll open it up to Q&A. Thank you very much.
We're going to have all three go up on stage. We're going to do some Q&A. Let's first, I mean, these are huge projects. Their time, effort, and commitment to Marysville and Union County means so much. So let's give them another round of applause for their commitment to our community. As they walk up, I know there's some questions because there's a lot of information we just shared with you all. So questions. I see a young man over here. If you could state your name and then your question.
My name is Dale Mabry. For the silo project and the water treatment project, is there a timeline established for that?
We're currently working with the city right now on zoning. We're hoping to have that wrapped up before the end of the year. That would allow us to begin site work sometime in early '25, and our goal is to have the whole project completed before about the end of 2028 to sometime in mid-2029.
I know there has to be another question out there. So I'll ask a question.
I saw one in the back.
One in the back? Okay. You don't have to listen to me. Sue Devine. If you state your name over again.
Hi, this is Sue Devine. You've talked a lot about the partnership with the schools. I previously served on school boards. I believe I met with some of you. Can you explain a little bit more about the agreements that you've come up with? Because I know, the schools have a levy on the ballot, and I've heard some people say, schools, you're just giving up too much. And so kind of explain what the results have been with your partnership, please. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to do so, specifically related to the silo project and some of the details to that. I also think the other two gentlemen up here with me will be able to add a larger perspective of what those mean in business attraction. Regarding the silo project, so the site was truly a unique location. You had parcels of land located in a downtown area that were vacant, blighted, and undeveloped, and they were not generating property tax dollars for the school district because they were owned by a local government entity on top of being vacant and not providing a commercial service. So we worked very closely with the city and the school district to establish a plan that had multiple components to that. One of those is what's called a community reinvestment area, and that eliminated a percentage of the property tax on that site for a period of time. In our case, it's 100% for 15 years. Now, it sounds like then that the schools aren't receiving any financial benefit from it, but that's on the improved value of the land when we put our buildings on there. The schools will see an automatic increase in the funds they're receiving from the value of the land. So when we go and we rezone and we enhance the use of the land that's associated with it, there's new tax dollars that we have to pay on that. So all of those dollars will flow to the school. Now, it's not the whole amount for the whole site, obviously, because we have that tax abatement, but it is an increase to it. We also worked then with the school district for a TIF arrangement. A TIF allows us to take certain tax dollars that are generated from the site and put it towards infrastructure. So when our abatement ends, all of the infrastructure that we've agreed to do with the city, whether it's street improvements, streetscape improvements, the pedestrian bridge orientation, those types of products will be able to be paid for through those dollars, because otherwise the project isn't financially feasible. So on this site, what we have is a brownfield site, so it's contaminated land that is also in a floodplain. So we have to add soil to the land to take it out of the floodplain. We have to clean the soil. We have to clean all of the contamination on the site. We're not able to do that unless we have those types of agreements. And what was really impressive about this process was the fact that the school district and the city worked hand in hand to be able to establish a deal where they shared income tax that's generated from the site. So normally, as we put businesses on these types of properties, They create jobs. Those jobs pay income tax. The city collects that new income tax that it previously wasn't getting. In this case, the city agreed to share a portion of that income tax with the school district in order to help offset the amount of tax dollars from property that they were willing to invest back into the deal to see this project happen. And I think one of the key items for everyone in the community to hear about, and what I think really helped drive this forward among the elected officials, is the fact that we had presented a third-party independent study that showcased that the project, upon completion, by establishing approximately 250 more residential units in the downtown, will spin off up to $8 million in revenue being spent in the downtown to local downtown businesses by the new residents that are coming in. So the city viewed it as a way in which to support existing businesses within the downtown community by increasing housing options and bringing new business to the existing businesses here in the community. This was also a chance where we were able to bring both brownfield dollars from the state, as well as that TMUD that I talked about earlier, back into the downtown area. So you're talking about $9 million in funding that would not have previously have been coming to Marysville, that is coming from the state of Ohio. So all of those things coming together is what made this a great project for the community. Removing blighted land in the downtown, bringing new residential units, returning a property to a commercial status, all of these things is really the key aspects of the project that makes it transformative in nature.
So that was a great, I think currently the property where Connect's developing is generating about $12,000 in total property taxes, I believe, today. And during the incentive period, it will generate about $170,000 a year alone to the school district annually. So that's the impact of this project and getting rid of a blighted property as well. Yes.
Thank you, Marie Keister, and really great presentations, all three of you. New Albany Company. So you talked about the community engagement, and just a few months ago, we had a lot of community members here who are very anxious about change and economic development. What have your conversations been like with the community, and how do you think you've been able to bring them along to welcome you as opposed to oppose you?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things there. One, a lot of the conversations we've had with individual community members are neighbors who had concerns about the impact of our proposed development on their property. So it was less holistically about, the type of development that we're doing and what may go there, although that has come up sometimes. When we're talking about permitted uses or conditional uses on a property, there are some things that sound a little more frightening than others, and we took all that feedback into account and actually made some changes on what we will allow on our development. But more so, it was buffering our development to a different use, residential in this case, to make sure noise, lighting, traffic aren't issues. All these things impact the character of the development that we're planning, and we do things over a very long time horizon. And I mentioned we've been here for a year and a half and haven't put a shovel in the ground because it has been a lot of planning and having these conversations and seeing what happens when you move this road over a little bit, or if you build this mound a couple feet higher, does that make the neighbors happier with us? So it's been less about the jobs and investment that we're trying to prepare for, and more about just make sure you don't mess with my quality of life.
Steve Stolde, question with regard to the Marysville South project, specifically with regard to access. Is that the permanent access, will that come from Scotts Lawn Road or from Industrial Parkway and go over the railroad or under the railroad? And whereabouts along Industrial Parkway do you envision that being located?
So it hasn't been finalized. We're working on it right now, but I will share, and this was shared at our last zoning presentation a couple of weeks ago, that our focus for primary access now is off of Industrial Parkway. It would be an overpass in the area across the street from where Sumitomo is located. But a lot needs to happen between now and when that development would start. We are in a very early stage working with the railroad, so it's going to take some time. Thank you. A lot of design work.
Can't imagine an engineer asking that question. But to Matt McAllister, I want a question for you. So people are scared to death, to Marie's point, about too much growth, too fast, traffic, those impacts of growth and development. We look at a region, we also look at the state of Ohio. Could you add context to what the state of Ohio is currently looking at, what Columbus means to Ohio and the growth in the future?
Yeah, I'll also temper my comments with, we are not growing nearly as quickly as a lot of the peer metro groups that we compare ourselves against. The Midwest we are, but we're about middle of the pack for population growth, job growth, for the 30 metropolitan areas that we can compare ourselves against. And those are ones that have between 2 and 3 million people. We're at 2.3 million people for our region right now. So it's kind of the peer group that we look at. I think there's 29, 28 other communities and then our region. So with that being said, we are driving Ohio's population growth. If you look at our 11 counties over the past decade, we've added about 218,000 people. The rest of the state has lost a collective 13,000. Now, a lot of that loss has been to our region. In that time period, about half of our population growth came from outside of our region, but inside the state of Ohio. So that would be about 100,000 people, plus or minus, coming from other parts of Ohio into our region. So that's not sustainable. About half of our population growth comes from outside the region. And when you look at the 2050 assessment that's been done, they project, from 2020 to 2050, that's going to shift. It'll be about 75% of our growth will be from outside of our region, and about 25% will be organic growth. Now, they haven't separated out how much is going to be of that from outside of our region is going to be from Ohio and outside of Ohio. But I would say that it's also going to shift trends there as well, because there's only so many people that are going to move. And with that being said, places like Dayton are doing much better now than they were in 2010, for sure. And places like Cleveland, I think they've stopped the flow of population out. They just haven't really turned the corner and started to grow their population there. And Cincinnati's basically maintained a pretty steady state. So when you think about the large population centers, I think they've stabilized. We'll see fewer people moving from them. We'll probably be seeing more people move from outside the state, especially as we have some of these large transformational or mega projects, because they're the ones that are going to be attracting a lot of employees from outside the state, as well as providing opportunities for people inside the state.
Matt, how does housing, affordability, and accessibility play a part in all this?
I mean, look, it's critical. And we are going to grow as a region, and there are communities that are completely on board with that, 100% on board with that. They want to grow, and they're the communities that'll win. And those communities that don't want to grow and put up a wall and put moratorium on things like housing developments, they'll probably, be stuck. And I think that they're going to lose some of the appeal that they have as a location for a business, because if the businesses can't, if we have a CEO in town and they're doing a site tour, it's not uncommon for them to say, okay, great, love the site, where are people going to live? And can we see that quickly? And I want to see some apartments, and I want to see, a middle management neighborhood. That's almost like part of our tour now, without even them asking, because we know that it's top of mind for them. So, it is absolutely critical. There will be places that win, though, in our region, because they are preparing for growth, and they have been growing. The city of Columbus is a great example of that. The city of Columbus accounts for over half of our permits issued in our entire region. We had about 12,500 permits issued in 2023, compared to about 15 to 16,000 in Indianapolis. Indianapolis, 17% were in the city of Indianapolis. The rest of them were in the suburban markets. So that's a different dynamic. So we definitely have, growth opportunities, and most of them will be in the suburbs in our future.
It's how we manage it together. Another question, Steve, second question.
Steve Stolde again. Comment, not a question, with regard to the Water and Light project, specifically about moving the String Road Bridge. You know, that bridge is 110 years old, and all the ornamentation on the top of that is original. It's never been replaced, never been repaired. Today, that people can drive through that bridge, people can see the bridge. I'm concerned about it being buried in that development such that people driving down Main Street cannot see it. So I would love to see that bridge brought closer to Main Street, where the beauty of that bridge can be enjoyed by everybody in Marysville.
No, I definitely appreciate it, and those are great comments regarding the bridge. I think the key factors to keep in mind on the bridge is it is being planned by the county and the state to be taken down one way or another, and then it would normally be put into storage, if even saved at all. Our goal in working with the city was to find a way in which to preserve that bridge. One of the great things about Connect for that type of a project is you saw two of the projects that we'd previously done. Those are only two of over a dozen projects that are historically related that we have worked on, the majority of which tied to historic tax credits. What that means is when you do his historic tax credit deal, you're working with the state as well as the federal government on preserving that building in a manner in which individuals, whether architects, planners, historic preservation professionals, are all focused on making sure the building maintains its historic character. So we are very familiar with taking very old historic buildings or the building materials associated with those buildings, preserving them, returning them to a workable condition. And so we will do the same type of care with that bridge in partnership with the county and the city. The comment I would give you is we are working right now on some updated renderings that will show night lighting of that bridge. I think when you see that, you'll see that we are making the bridge very much a visual focus of the development, that we're doing things to tie it in and to respect that historic nature of the bridge. Fortunately, I was having some issues on controlling the slide deck there. I think if that had not, yeah, well, somebody helped you, but no, I think if you would have seen that and I could have better walked you through it, you would have seen that from the existing bridge looking down towards where we're looking at the new bridge and the new fitness facility. It's going to be very visual. That bridge has a lot of height to it, so it will stand out as a key feature of this development. But I absolutely agree with you. It's a great piece that's currently in the community, and we want to make sure we're highlighting it correctly.
Great question from the bridge guy of Union County. Thanks, Steve, for that question. Okay. Great presentations, great information. Let's give the two Matts and the Bob a round of applause. The Bob. I want to close. Our next speaker series event is October 22nd. We all know Steve Stivers. He used to be our U.S. Congressman here. He'll come and talk about growth, development, housing, economic development in our community. We invite you, 6 p.m. on the 22nd. I want to close with one comment. And we live in a very, very special place. We have a community where we all work together. And I have to give a shout out to the school district and their leadership with these projects to work with these developers. It's not always easy, especially in today's world. We have levies. The schools have levies. Other or entities have levies. And we need to support our community because costs have gone up. And in closing, just think about where Marysville can go together and we can work together. And these series are brought to you so you can actually learn more and ask questions so we can grow together and we can actually it can result in prosperity. So again, thank you for coming tonight. October 22nd is our next event. So thank you. Have a nice night. Thank you.